It started as a whisper in the sky, a hush that moved through the air like something waiting to unfold. The day had been warm, unremarkable, just another evening slipping into routine. But as the sun dipped behind the hills, the sky thickened, bruising into something unnatural. The clouds didn't roll in. They formed, congealing in stillborn shapes that pulsed faintly in the deepening twilight. The first drop hit my windshield with a soft patter, then another. The wipers smeared a streak of something viscous across the glass. Not water. Something thicker, something wrong. I flipped on the overhead light, peering closer. The droplets shimmered, deep, luminous blue. By the time I turned onto my street, the entire neighborhood glowed with an eerie phosphorescence, the pavement slick with neon puddles that reflected the street lamps like liquid sapphire. The air carried a scent, heavy and intoxicating. Not the earthy petrichor of fresh rain on dry soil, but something sweet, something syrupy, cloying in the back of the throat. I sat there for a moment, watching the rain slide down my windshield in slow, glowing rivulets. A strange sensation unfurled in my chest. Not quite fear, not quite wonder. Something in between. The neighborhood was awake. Porch lights flickered on, doors creaked open, and people stepped out into the glowing storm. They moved sluggishly, dreamlike, gazing skyward as if waiting for an answer to a question they didn't know they had asked. The rain dappled their skin in luminescent beads, turning their faces ghostly blue. I stepped out. The first droplets that touched my skin sent a shiver up my arm. Not cold, not warm, but electric. A slow-building hum, a tingling sensation that prickled beneath the surface, spreading outward like tiny static shocks. Across the street, Mr. Calloway, an elderly man with a bad hip, stood barefoot on his lawn, arms outstretched. He tilted his head back, mouth slightly open, as if waiting to drink it in. His lips curled into a smile, so wide it looked painful. A woman a few houses down twirled in slow circles, arms lifted like she was waltzing with the rain itself. Her movements were sluggish, uncoordinated, as though she was pulling against invisible strings. A deep, guttural laugh escaped her lips, something full-bodied and primal, the sound of a person unburdened by thought. The sound burrowed into me, pressing against the inside of my ribs, and I had the strangest urge to laugh too. I almost did, and then the dog changed. At first, it was just lapping at a puddle near the curb, its tongue flicking over the glowing surface. The reaction was immediate. Its ears twitched, its tail stiffened, and its head jerked upward as though it had been jolted awake from a deep dream. A shudder rippled through its small frame. It let out a low, trembling whine, eyes rolling back into its skull. And then its body shifted. The change was subtle at first. A twitch here, a ripple there, like watching the reflection of a moving cloud in a pond. But then something beneath the skin moved. Not muscle, not bone, but something else. Something that didn't belong. The fur along its spine lifted, stretched, as if the body underneath was reshaping itself. I blinked. The dog stood still again, panting lightly, staring at nothing. For a moment, I thought I had imagined it. But the rain continued to fall, thick and endless, and the laughter from the street deepened into something else. Something heavier. Something I didn't have a name for. I wiped my arm where the rain had touched me. My skin tingled, faintly warm beneath my fingertips. I rubbed harder, but the sensation only deepened, seeping inward like ink on paper. Somewhere behind me, a car door slammed. Too sharp, too sudden, cutting through the muffled dream state of the street. I turned, but no one was there. Only houses bathed in blue glow, their windows like unblinking eyes. A gust of wind kicked up, carrying with it the rain scent, thick, cloying, sweet. I pressed a hand to my mouth. The air felt denser now, like breathing through honey. Something shifted near the curb. The dog. It had moved. Not walked, moved. It was closer now, but I hadn't seen it take a single step. It sat stiffly, its body oddly still, except for its ribs, which expanded and contracted too quickly, too shallowly. Its pupils had shrunk to pinpricks. Its mouth opened, but no sound came out. Another gust of wind. The laughter from the street quieted. Not stopped, just dim like a radio being dialed down. A sudden, overwhelming instinct told me to go inside. I turned sharply and walked to my front door. My steps felt too heavy, my limbs unsteady. The tingling sensation had spread up my arms, curling around my shoulders, creeping down my spine. I fumbled with my keys, fingers sluggish, and shoved the door open. The warm light of the entryway spilled out, cutting a wedge into the blue haze. I stepped inside. The moment the door clicked shut behind me, the world outside seemed impossibly distant. The laughter, the strange stillness of my neighbors, the shimmering rain, it all felt like something that belonged to another world, one that had no business touching mine. I exhaled. The air inside my house felt normal, dry, unaltered, but my skin still tingled. I turned my hands over, examining my palms. The sensation was still there, faint, electric, a memory of something I hadn't fully experienced yet. Outside, the rain poured harder, and I realized, with a slow, creeping unease, that I wasn't sure if I'd locked the door. By morning, the world had turned into a liquid dream. The rain hadn't stopped. It had intensified. Thick, endless sheets of blue poured from the sky, turning the streets into glowing rivers. The entire town was bathed in a pulsing, ethereal glow, as if submerged in a neon ocean. The air was heavy, thick with that syrupy scent that clung to the lungs like damp velvet. It filled every inhale, coating the throat in something that was almost pleasant but too intrusive to ignore. The air itself seemed altered, alive, humming with an unseen frequency that vibrated just beneath the skin. I stayed inside for as long as I could. The window panes shimmered with the glow of the storm, casting shifting blue patterns across the walls. The sound of the rain had changed overnight. It no longer pattered, no longer whispered against the rooftops. It hissed, a soft and insistent sound, like a distant, living thing whispering in a language I couldn't quite hear. The news was useless. Every channel showed the same thing. Smiling anchors with vacant eyes, their words too slow, too measured. They called it an unexplained atmospheric phenomenon, explaining away the euphoria as a side effect of unknown chemicals in the rain. They repeated the same phrases over and over, looping footage of distant government officials advising people to stay indoors, stay calm, wait for more information. But no one was waiting. Outside, the streets had become something else entirely. The town square was packed with people, arms raised to the sky, letting the rain soak into their clothes, their skin, their bones. Their faces were stretched into wide, unnatural grins, their lips stained blue. Some swayed gently, as if moving to a song only they could hear. Others simply stood still, eyes closed, their chests rising and falling with deep, blissful breaths. The air pulsed with an electric sort of joy, a feeling that pulled at something inside me. A weightless sensation, a whisper of euphoria curling at the edges of my mind, urging me to step outside, to let the rain touch me again. I gripped the doorframe, fingers tightening. A woman near the fountain twirled, her wet hair fanning around her, droplets flying like tiny, glowing stars. She moved too fluidly, too loosely, like something had unspooled inside her. A man knelt in the middle of the street, his hands submerged in a deep puddle, staring at his reflection. His shoulders shook, not with fear, not with sobs, but laughter. Soundless, endless laughter. I should have left then. I should have. But I didn't. That night, my fingers started peeling. At first, it was just a tingle, an itch beneath the surface. When I finally glanced down, I saw the thin slivers of skin curling at the tips of my fingers, like the aftermath of a bad sunburn. I picked at one absent-mindedly, pulling it back. It peeled too easily, too cleanly, revealing something smooth beneath, pale, almost translucent, but new. My stomach turned, but the sensation wasn't painful. In fact, it felt good. A strange, satisfying relief, like shedding something I no longer needed. I pressed my palms together. The texture was different, softer. Outside, The rain came down in an unbroken curtain. The town square was still full of people, even at this hour. Some lay sprawled in the street, letting the puddles rise around them, submerging themselves in the shallow pools with blissful smiles on their faces. Others stood, motionless, their heads tilted up toward the sky, mouths open. The air carried something new now, a faint wet sound, a gentle squelching, like something soft being pulled apart. I turned toward the house across the street. Mr. Calloway stood on his front lawn, or what was left of him. His skin hung from his arms in long, wet sheets, sloughing off in damp, curling strips. It peeled away too cleanly, too easily, revealing something underneath. Not muscle, not bone, something new. His body was reshaping itself, unraveling from the inside. His limbs lengthened, his spine arched, his hands flexed. Longer now, the fingers tapering into something that wasn't quite human. He raised his face to the sky, eyes closed, letting the blue rain soak into the raw, shifting surface of his body. And he smiled, a deep, euphoric, contented smile. I stepped away from the window. My hands still tingled. The itching had spread, and the rain kept falling. I sealed the house. Every door, every window. Locked, bolted, covered. It wasn't enough. The blue glow seeped through the cracks, thin veins of light pulsing along the edges of the curtains, creeping through the spaces under the doors. It felt alive, stretching, reaching. I sat in the center of the living room, watching the shadows shift along the walls, listening to the rain. The itching didn't stop. My hands trembled as I examined my fingers. The peeling had worsened. What had started as thin, curling strips had spread, widening into soft, damp sheets of flesh that sloughed away at the lightest touch. It should have hurt. It should have. But there was only a strange relief, a dull, tingling sensation that grew more pleasurable the more I pulled. The nails loosened next. They lifted at the edges, detaching from the soft, raw surface beneath them. I pressed against them, watching as they wobbled, barely clinging. It would take nothing, just the faintest pressure, to peel them away completely. I clenched my fists, forcing my hand against my sides. I wouldn't touch them. I wouldn't. Outside, the town was unrecognizable. The streets were no longer streets. They were pools, ankle-deep lakes of phosphorescent water, glowing with that eerie blue radiance. The houses, the streetlights, even the trees, everything was slick with it, bathed in the sickly, shifting glow. The people had changed too. Those who had stood in the rain too long weren't people anymore. They moved strangely, fluidly, their bodies elongated, limbs stretching beyond their natural proportions. Their skin hung loose, draped in translucent layers that shifted and shimmered, as if something beneath was still growing, still reshaping. Their faces were wrong, jawlines tapering into something sharper, foreheads stretched too high, mouths too wide. And their eyes, deep, glowing embers burning behind the thin membranes of what had once been human flesh. They didn't speak. They only watched. They stood in the streets, unmoving, heads tilted at odd angles, waiting. For what, I didn't know. But they saw me. Even through the windows, even through the sealed doors, I felt their gazes pressing against me, cold and invasive, crawling over my skin like unseen fingers. I turned on the television, desperate for something, anything to anchor me to the world I had known. The screen flickered, static cutting in and out, distorting images that barely resembled human broadcasts. Then the signal steadied. A pulsing blue glow filled the screen. No news anchors, no emergency alerts. Just that endless, shifting radiance pulsating in slow, hypnotic waves. And then the whispering began, low at first, just beneath the range of comprehension. A language I didn't know, couldn't recognize, but somehow understood. It slithered into my ears, curling inside my skull, wrapping around my thoughts like vines. The words dripped with meaning, seeping into my brain, rewiring something fundamental. A voice, soft and endless, murmuring secrets I had no right to hear. It told me that the change was necessary, that I was becoming, that I had been waiting for this my entire life. It whispered that the rain wasn't a sickness, wasn't a curse. It was correction. The sensation in my fingers deepened. I lifted my hand. My last fingernail had come loose. It hung, barely attached, swaying gently with my movement. I reached out, pressed it lightly. It fell away. A new surface gleamed beneath it. Smooth, translucent, soft as wet silk. I turned my hand under the light, watching as the glow of the television pulsed against my skin. The new flesh caught it strangely, bending the light, absorbing it. The whispering in my head grew louder. Outside, the figures in the street had turned. They were facing my house now, waiting. I wasn't alone anymore. Even with the doors locked, the windows sealed, the lights dimmed to nothing, I could feel them inside. The house breathed differently, its silence altered by the weight of something unseen. The walls were too thin, the air too thick. Something moved, not in the obvious way, not footsteps or doors creaking, but something deeper. A presence shifting between the walls, stretching through the spaces that shouldn't have existed. My skin had changed further. The old flesh had begun peeling in thick, curling strips, detaching too easily, drifting to the floor like shed petals. The sensation was not pain. It was relief, a strange exhale, like releasing something I had never realized I'd been holding on to. The glow outside had deepened, the rain turning from neon blue to something darker, heavier, pooling into depths that no longer reflected the world properly. I should have stayed hidden. I should have kept my eyes shut, should have ignored the whispers bleeding through the static of the television, ignored the way the air felt thick with unseen movement. But the house wasn't silent anymore. A sound, not knocking, not breaking, something softer, like damp paper being torn apart, like wet cloth unraveling. And then the scent, sweet, familiar, not the syrupy tang of the rain anymore, but something warmer, something I knew, something like flesh. The door had remained locked, the windows untouched, but he was inside. Nathan, or what was left of him. He stood in the threshold of the hallway, his silhouette stretched, reshaped. The skin on his face hung loose, as though it no longer fit the bone beneath. His mouth had widened, his lips curling around teeth that weren't where they should have been. They shifted inside the gums, adjusting, restless. His clothes were damp with the rain, but his body had already changed too much to wear them properly. His arms, too long. His fingers, missing their nails. He smelled like honey and decay. His presence filled the room in ways I couldn't comprehend. Not just his body, but him, bleeding into the space, stretching through the unseen cracks in the air itself. He told me it was time, that the waiting was over, that I had shed just right, that I was perfect. The way he smiled wasn't human. His lips moved, but the muscles beneath them didn't work like they used to. They twitch in slow, unnatural ripples, spreading wider than they should, exposing the shifting mess of teeth underneath. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I ran. The air itself resisted me. The room seemed to bend, stretching outward as though trying to trap me inside. The walls felt farther apart, the hallway longer. The door wasn't where I had left it, but I kept moving, forcing myself through the narrowing space, the shifting architecture of my own house twisting under the weight of something incomprehensible. The rain was heavier now, the sound of it deafening as I tore open the door and stumbled into the glowing abyss outside. And I was no longer sure if I was escaping, or if I was stepping closer to the thing that had been waiting for me all along. I ran until the houses disappeared behind me, until the streets bled in an empty highway and the ground sloped beneath the weight of the storm. The blue rain followed, but it hadn't touched everything. Not yet. Beyond the overpass, the land was dry. The air felt thinner here, lighter, untainted by the syrup-thick scent that still clung to the back of my throat. I staggered forward, past the rusting skeletons of abandoned cars, their doors yawning open like mouths. The windows were fogged with something too thick to be condensation. Some of them still held things inside, things that had once been people. Shapes slumped in the driver's seats, curled in the back, their bodies suspended in half-completed transformations. Stretched limbs, elongated fingers, faces frozen mid-shed. Some had peeled too fast, their old flesh still hanging from them in translucent ribbons, clinging like wet lace. Others had stopped midway, their features warped between before and after, something unfinished, something left behind. I didn't stop to look. The air was wrong. It pressed inward, heavy and silent, despite the roaring rain still flooding the town behind me. The highway should have stretched forward, leading me away, leading me out. But then I saw it, the source. Beyond the storm clouds, something moved. Not a shape, not exactly. Something bigger, something vast. The sky itself shifted, folding over itself in thick, writhing tendrils that stretched down with the rain, merging with the storm as though they had always been part of it. They pulsed, slow and deliberate, seeding the earth with the blue rain, feeding it, stretching into the soil, into the buildings, into the bodies that had once belonged to my town. I had never been religious, but I understood now what it meant to look upon something too vast, too unknowable to comprehend. It was watching, not with eyes, but with presence, with the slow, seeping intelligence of something ancient. It didn't need to chase. It didn't need to hunt. It had already won. I collapsed against the side of a wrecked truck, breath hitching, chest heaving. My skin still tingled, the last remnants of my old self unraveling thread by thread. The peeling hadn't stopped. The new flesh underneath no longer felt like mine. I pressed a hand to my throat, feeling the vibration beneath my fingertips. The sound that came out wasn't my voice. Not anymore. The whispering in my head had grown stronger, winding itself through my thoughts like a second pulse, something deeper than instinct, something older. A truth that had been waiting for me to listen. It only hurts the first time you shed. The highway stretched onward, but I wasn't sure if I was supposed to keep running, or if I was meant to let go.